Hey everyone, my name's Ben. This is the mini painting page and welcome, where today we're going to be looking at a base that is suitable for both fantasy as well as sci-fi, by the sheer nature of the fact that the base we're looking at is a field setting base. This is going to be obviously suitable for fantasy, things like Rohan-esque Lord of the Rings style bases, as well as due to the fact that sci-fi can be set on a myriad of different planets and settings, also possibly useful for sci-fi. The way we've built this does include some UV resin, however if you don't have that you can use 2-part epoxy, and the way we've made it does mean that we're less likely to have any risks of leaking all over the desk when we leave it to cure. So let's not waste any more time, jump straight in and see how it's done. To start off, what we want to do is grab a base, and here we want a Games Workshop style base, by which I mean a base where there is a pocket beneath. With this base we want to flip it over so that we have a tiny flat bottomed bowl. With this done, we can revel in the moment and grab some plasticard. I'm personally going to be using some blank ID cards. I found these to be a relatively easy and cost-effective way to obtain plasticard, providing the smaller size isn't too much of an issue. Regardless of how we've obtained our plasticard sheets, what we want to do is cut the sheet so that it covers the opening and is the same diameter as the base that we're using. To make this slightly easier, I'm going to use some super glue just to hold it in place as we cut round the edge of the base, leaving us with a nice small plastic disc. We can then take this newly formed disc and make a hole for the water effects that we will be adding later. Depending on the thickness of the card, we may have varying amounts of difficulty doing this. What I'm going to do is take a craft knife and cut a rough shape into the card, and then I can clear that up later if needed. With this done, we can take our holy disc and glue it with super glue to a thin sheet of cork. This will build up some height on the base, as well as acting as a foundation that we can work from for the later steps. Once the glue is completely dry and the disc is affixed to the cork, we can break the cork to the same size as the disc. I'm achieving that here by pushing the cork and bending it across the sections of the plastic disc, which gives us a quick conforming shape and giving a natural looking texture on the edge of the base. Once everything is tight together and we have the holes in all the right places, we can put a healthy amount of super glue all over the edges of the base rim and then press this firmly into the plastic bottom of our new disc. This should ensure that a secure bond is between both parts, leaving us with a completely sealed plastic puck with a hole on the side where the cork is. This will be our canvas for the Mini, which all bases can be a little seen. Here I'm aiming for a Rohan-esque style field. However, naturally, you can shift up some of the placement styles and paintings to come to a different environment using the same steps. For the next steps, we can look to put down a decent layer of texture paste as a starting point. Here I'm going to be using a sand-based paste, which is mostly just PVA and sand, so you could make a very similar version at home without a lot of effort. What we want to do is ensure that we cover the full top area of the cork. While this is wet, we can also then come back in and add any of our larger rock pieces. Here what we're going to be doing is sticking down a little piece of slate near the edge of the water, and to affix this we can just put down a dot of the paste that we're already using, or if we're slightly concerned we can put down a dab of super glue and then smush this into the sand in the chosen location. This should result in the texture paste that is already on the base being pushed out of the sides of the rock, which we can then take a brush that we don't really care much about, come in and use that to blend the rock in with the rest of the base, making it look less like a rock has just been plonked on a base. This is also probably the best time to add any additional details that we plan on painting. Whether this be sticks or skulls, we can add them in. For this base, we like the idea of a skull covered in sediment by the water's edge, so we pick out a suitable skull from the GW skull pack and popped it in the hole. And then what we did was add a thin layer of texture paste across the model to help hold it down and add the texture sediment that we were going for. Naturally, if you wanted a fresh, clean skull without the sediment, you could just hold this down with super glue and you would get the same effect, but not obscuring any of the details essentially. So bear that in mind and you could paint it as a fresh skull. With all our desired additional aspects added, we can pull down a can of Zandri dust and lay down a quick undercoat across all of the base, and use that as our undercoat when we begin painting. To start off with the muddy rocky floor, we want to take two colours, one being a dark green and the other being an orange brown. Taking these colours, we want to put them down in relatively thick coats across sporadic sections of the base. Then, while it is wet, we can blend these areas together, which will give us a nice transition between the two colours as a base coat. We then want to go in and pick out the slate with a contrasting blue, which will hopefully add some cooler tones to the rock and the overall base. While this is wet, we can also come in and mix in some of the original colours we used for the wider base to simulate the mixing of tones and debris and dirt that would happen in the wild and in nature. Then it's just a case of waiting for it to dry entirely. Once it is, we can take a light flesh colour and dry brush this across the entirety of the base, which will hopefully tie the overall colours together while leaving some variance and nuance in the recesses of the base. This can then be followed up with another lighter dry brush. However, this time we want to use a lighter ivory off-white colour instead of the flesh tone. This should just be hitting the highest areas of the base where there would be the most light impact. Personally, I would suggest multiple light passes to build up this colour, as opposed to one thick dry brush. Once these dry brushes are dry and we are happy with the change between shadow to the highest highlighted areas, we can come in and add some washes. And yes, washes. We don't want to just use one colour and then just blend the whole thing. What we want to do is use a myriad of different colours. Here we're going to be using Nuln Oil, Reikland Flesh Shade and Agrax Earth Shade. Naturally, you can swap these out for any other colours you have a preference for or a preferred outcome. Possibly some reds and or some purples for a sci-fi feel. Taking these three colours, what we want to do is apply them in a semi-erratic manner across the base, which will hopefully add a layer of colour mixing and tone change across the base. Once this is dry to its fullest, and we need to make sure it is dry so there is no colour change in the next steps, we can go through with 2 rounds of dry brushing. The first one will be a orange brown, so the orange brown we used for the initial base coat on the base will be used as a dry brush now, and we can go over and use that to add some earth tones back to the base, and then finish off with a final light dry brush of the ivory or off-white that we used as the final highlight earlier. Once all this dry brushing is done, we can cover the entirety of the base in an Agrax Earth Shade wash, and then come back quickly and dab this away with a paper towel to pull most of that back off of the base. This will hopefully give us a mottled mixed tone base, which will look more realistic than a consistent brown tone which would have been there if we'd coated the base in a wash and left it. At this point though, we are mostly there. We can opt to add the water effect now if we wish, but I thought it'd be a good time to add one more extra detail to help this base shine a little bit. What we're going to do is add some water reeds into the water of this water base as a minor element of height and to hopefully add to the base's profile. To achieve this, what we're going to do is take some tall grass for model scenery, which conveniently I have in a drawer that I bought for this very purpose. Taking a small grouping of these reeds, I can use some super glue to bunch them together, and then once they're dry, we have a little bundle of reeds perfect for use. A quick tip here, I have found that painter's brushes, so the wall painter's brushes, I don't know why I'm doing this as if you don't know what a brush is, but the wall painter's brushes that you can get tend to be very thick haired, so I think it's hog hair or something similar. But because of this, they act as a very good substitute. If you don't happen to have any of these reeds available, you can essentially just clip them off from a brush like that, and you would have a very readily available substitute for the material that I'm using here. However we opt to make our bunch of reeds, we can take a little bit of super glue on the base and then pop them into the watering hole. Once the reeds are dry and they are sitting upright, we can move over to filling the hole with some liquid. As mentioned earlier at the beginning of the episode, I am going to be using some UV resin, which we can quickly pop into the hole for the water and then use a UV light source to cure it in a quick manner. We then have the opportunity to add any of the last additions. This could be grass tufts, or like we are here, going to be cutting down the height of the reeds. We can use a spare mini for a size gauge if needed, But what we want to do is come in and just clip away at the right size so we know where they're going to be. We can also be confident that these reeds are not going to shift or detach while we're coming in and pruning them. This is because we've glued it down with UV resin, so it's highly unlikely for these to shift, and we can be confident that they're staying where they are. That leaves us with the final step of going round and giving the rim a good lick of your chosen black paint, and then we can mount a miniature and get it out to the game. This base is something that can be variated relatively easily, as well as achieved in a quick manner. If we're using UV resin, we can pop quite a few of these out within a day. And because of the way we've constructed the base, where it is a hopefully sealed unit, we can be relatively sure if we need to use 2-part resin to get that water effect that we won't have any leakage there either. However, some people don't like water effects, and potentially you don't have the equipment to do that. That's not a problem at all. I have a playlist of a few other ways that you can build bases and a few other styles you can adopt, including how to paint them. So why not check that out here? Otherwise, remember to subscribe so that we can see you next time.